Welcome to my channel, and this is English Podcast.
Hey, Aubrey. We are talking about exercise today. Well,
yes,
kind of.
I'm so excited to hear your sample part 2 answer because it sounds like it comes with a very fun story. It'd be great.
Yes, guys. So in the second part of today's episode, I'm going to provide a sample part 2 answer about describing an exercise that I often do. And I was telling Aubrey before we recorded, I was like, oh, there's exciting news I forgot to tell you, but I can include it in the answer. So stay tuned for that, you guys.
Yes, I can't wait. We got a really good question about speaking part 2. And we want, actually, the reason it was such a good question is the name. The person's name is Boogeyman, which I love. This is their Spotify name. We want to share. This means a couple different things in English. One of them is like a scary monster. Like, oh, the boogeyman is like
if it's
under
all
your bed.
one word. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And,
exactly. Yeah, like if you watch any supernatural stories, like the show literally called Supernatural, or Grimm, like any show that features a bunch of different monsters, there's always going to be a show about a boogeyman. And every culture has boogeymans and their fables and stuff. But also, boogie, just by itself as a verb, means to dance, to boogie. So very different meanings there.
Yeah, I'm not sure which one this student means, right? If they like to dance or the scary version.
I don't know.
So different.
But guys, you have to watch this video on YouTube because like we are acting out both the scary and the dancing. So remember to go to YouTube and subscribe to IELTS Energy TV. All right, so let's get into this, Aubrey. Before we get to my sample model part 2 answer, let's talk about how to start part 2 because I feel like, a lot of students, even high-level students, are starting part 2 wrong.
Yes, exactly, right? Our student Boogeyman asked, how do I answer speaking part 2? And this is one of the biggest mistakes we see is when students begin their answer, it's monotone, it's boring, it's not exciting. Your pronunciation score goes down if you don't have interesting intonation. And you're also not engaging the examiner, pulling them in, getting them excited to hear your answer. There are so many better ways to start your answer. So first we're going to share how you should not start your answer. And then we'll share better options of how to start your speaking part 2 answer.
All right. So if your answer begins with something that is not natural, don't say it. Okay. So for example, you might see this in IELTS textbooks even. It tells you to start part 2. Today, I would like to talk about... whatever.
Yes.
Let's just use today's topic as an example, an exercise you do often. Today, I would like to talk about an exercise I do often. Okay, we would never say that in real life, guys, unless you are starting, like a speech or a presentation. And that is not what IELTS is.
Yeah, and not only is it a pronunciation issue where that's going to tend toward monotony, like you're likely going to say this in a monotone, but just like Jessica said, it's also very unnatural. If you're going to tell someone about an exercise, you would never start describing it by saying, I would like to tell you about an exercise I do. That would be very strange.
It is my pleasure to talk about how I lift weights at the gym 3 days a week. Like, no, it's not. So we'll give you some more examples, guys, but the overall piece of advice here is that we need to start part 2 in a natural way, and we will tell you how to do that in just a minute. So let's just quickly go through this list, Aubrey, of how not to start speaking part 2. What else should we not say?
Yes, we also don't want to say, today I will talk about, or today my answer will be. These, again, are very unnatural. It sounds like you're starting a speech instead of describing to a friend an exercise.
Right. Or I would like to tell you about, just nothing like that, guys. And the last thing to definitely not do in speaking part 2 is just to read the card. And I've seen a lot of students do this, where the examiner will say, you can begin speaking now, please. And the student just looks at the card and just reads it. Describe an exercise you do often. Okay.
Where they say, I have been asked to describe an exercise I read often. And then they even might read the 3 bullet points.
Yeah,
no,
I've seen it happen.
Yeah.
Do not do that. So, Aubrey, what are our options for starting part 2 naturally?
Yes, instead, start it how you would actually tell a friend about an exercise. Like, I cannot wait to tell you about this new exercise I've been trying.
Exactly. But it has to be it has to make sense, right? So you can't say like, I cannot wait to tell you about this nightmare that I've had recently. Like it has to make sense. So that's why we're giving you guys lots of options today, because in these options, you will be able to find one that fits any topic, right? So here's the first one, right? I am so excited I got this question because I can talk about this thing. Or like, I actually can't believe I got this question because crazy story, I just saw my best friend from high school yesterday, like if that's the topic.
Yes, exactly. Or when I saw this topic, I thought, oh no. And then it could be that something you haven't thought about recently, or I don't have a lot to say about that. Admit that. That's no problem, right? As long as you then fill the 2 minutes telling a story, sharing anything related, that's a great way to start that answer.
Yeah, that is, I think, applicable to anything. Like if it's something great, you could be like, when I saw this topic, I was so excited because I'm actually a very healthy person and I exercise a lot. So I have a lot to say about this. Or if it's something you don't know about, when I saw this topic, I felt a little bit nervous, to be honest, because I haven't been to an art museum in 20 years.
Yeah, or maybe you're not into exercise. It's the same question, right?
Totally.
I kind of panicked because I honestly don't exercise very often. Just gonna be honest about that.
Yeah, totally.
Orthomol Immun ist dein Partner fürs Immunsystem. Und damit das einwandfrei funktionieren kann, ist eine ausreichende Versorgung mit Mikronährstoffen wichtig. Orthomol Immun ist ein Nahrungsergänzungsmittel zur gezielten Unterstützung des Immunsystems. Mit wichtigen Nährstoffen wie Vitamin C, D und Zink als Beitrag zu einer normalen Funktion des Immunsystems. Such jetzt online nach Orthomol Immun, informiere dich und sicher dir deine kostenlose Produktprobe.
All right, so it's time for me to give a sample part 2 answer. Now, I didn't really take a lot of notes for this, right? So this is just spontaneous, off the top of the dome, best I can do speaking part 2.
I love that idiom, off the top of the dome. Just means like the same as off the top of my head, right? Just on the fly. That's really fun. Okay, here's your question. Describe an exercise you do often.
Okay, I am so excited that I get to talk about exercise because I legit had a physical fitness breakthrough last week, okay? All right, let me give you some backstory first, some context so you can understand why this is an actual breakthrough. I have had 2 knee surgeries, and the last knee surgery I had, it fixed my ACL and my meniscus, and that was like, oof. Like 2 years ago? No, year and a half ago. Anyway, long story short, I have not been able to actually run for 2 years because, spoiler alert, I tore my ACL and meniscus again. So currently my knee is like half a knee. There's a bunch of stuff broken in there. Anyway, last week, we had a sunny day. It was like a high of 55. It was beautiful. And we've just had these ice storms and like, it was such a relief to have sun and warmth. And I thought, you know what? Jogging is basically just fast forward walking and I can do that. So I'm going to try jogging. I ended up running for almost 2 miles with my dogs in the sun. And I cannot tell you how relieved I was because I know the topic is something I do often. And I used to run all the time with my dogs. And I'm really hoping that this are you timing me?
I was about to say thank you, but no, I forgot to time you. So I'm really curious. You guys you'll have to look back and see how close that was to 2 minutes. I'm curious because I feel like Jessica really has a good feel for how long a 2-minute sample answer is. And I'm really curious if like right at 2 minutes, you were like, are you timing?
That would be so great. We got to look back
to go
and
check.
see that.
Oh man, such great intonation, like from the get with the way you started it to say, I am so excited I get to talk about this today, right? Fantastic. There's no monotone here. And the examiner, especially after probably several student answers, starting with like, today I will speak about, they're going to be excited to hear your answer. If you start it like this with interesting intonation. And then it's just so many great when you say, I legit had a physical fitness breakthrough. This chunk, you guys, you can replace physical fitness with anything. And this is such a useful chunk, right? If you say like, I legit found the most fantastic restaurant, or whatever it is, right? You can add breakthrough if it's some kind of breakthrough, but just to use the slang legit and this interesting pronunciation is very high level and impressive.
So legit is short for legitimately, and it replaces like really or honestly, I would have to say, like both of those meanings together, like really honestly, this is amazing and true. Like it kind of means all of those things.
Exactly. But band 9, because students don't use it very often. So practice using this. I legit, and then, anything that you would say, I truly did this. I honestly did this. And then I loved the way when you were not quite sure how long it had been, you were like, oh, that was, gosh, I think a year ago. And no, it was a year and a half ago. I want you guys to pay attention to this, because in an answer, if you want to correct yourself or you remember something different, absolutely go back and listen to how Jessica does it. It's so native and natural. Examiners do not consider this like pausing, hesitating, fixing a mistake. Not at all. This is very native and natural. And the vocab she uses to do that with the gosh, no, it's exactly how we do it, how native speakers interrupt themselves and change something.
Definitely go back, guys, and listen to a recent episode we did about pausing and hesitating. Let me find that.
I'm going to share one more piece of feedback while you look that up.
Perfect.
There was another thing I loved that you did where you, at the end, you were saying, I cannot tell you how relieved I was. And I really want to point out the pronunciation here, because if you say this in a monotone and say like, I cannot tell you how relieved I was, that would be so bizarre. Like this, you need to show that expressiveness, because if you're saying you're super excited or super relieved, it's very strange to do that without hitting it harder, without letting your emotion show in your voice. So again, go back and listen to the pronunciation so you can hear how to really get those higher pronunciation scores.
Totally. And go and watch this on YouTube if you're not watching this on YouTube, guys, if you're listening to the podcast, because you can see how we gesture with our hands, what our face does when our voice does certain things. It's all part of the communicative package, guys. So go to IELTS Energy TV. This is episode 1360. And go back, guys, and listen to episode 1350, pausing versus hesitating, what matters for speaking scores, because that will help explain some of Aubrey's excellent feedback today, why it matters and when it matters to pause and or hesitate on speaking. Awesome. Fantastic. I would love to hear what you guys would say to answer this question. So leave a comment on the YouTube channel. Go to IELTS Energy TV and comment on this video, 1360.
Awesome. Yes. Practice answering lots of different questions that might be asked about exercise, and practice starting your part 2 questions in a more interesting way to boost your fluency and pronunciation scores.
I read your essay. Some good points, but you could go deeper in a few places.
What areas do you mean?
The introduction is fine, but the main body needs more explanation. For example, when you mention social media, you should break it down more.
Right. I just mentioned how it affects people's mood, but didn't go into detail.
Exactly. Could you explain how it affects people specifically? Like, is it more psychological or emotional?
I suppose it's a mix of both. Social media can make people feel isolated or even anxious.
Good. Could you give an example? Maybe a case where a person spends too much time online and feels disconnected.
That would work. I could talk about how comparing oneself to others online might lower self-esteem.
Perfect. And maybe mention research or studies that back that up. It'll strengthen your argument.
So, you think adding more studies would make it stronger?
Yes, that would help. It's important to support your points with evidence.
Okay, I'll do that. Should I add a counterpoint too?
Yes, it's always good to consider both sides. Maybe you could mention the positive aspects of social media.
That's a good idea. Balance the argument.
Exactly, you don't want to sound biased. Show the full picture.
All right, I'll adjust it. Should I expand my conclusion too?
Definitely. You could wrap up with a stronger final thought, something to leave the reader thinking about.
Like a question or a call to action?
Either one works, something that invites reflection.
Got it. I'll revise those parts and bring it back to you.
Sounds good. Let's make sure it's as strong as it can be.
All right, let's take a deeper look at your conclusion. Right now, it just wraps things up without really pushing the reader to think more.
I see. It feels like it just ends without much impact, doesn't it?
Exactly. You want your conclusion to echo the importance of your argument. Maybe ask the reader to consider how they use social media in their own lives.
That's an interesting approach. So, you mean something like, how can we balance our use of social media to avoid the negative effects?
Yes, something like that. A thought-provoking question that connects back to your main idea.
I can do that. I think it'll make the reader pause and reflect.
Exactly, and after adding that, you can tie it back to your first point, the idea that social media's impact isn't all bad, but we need awareness.
So, maybe something like, while social media has its drawbacks, understanding how to use it wisely could minimize the negative effects.
I like that. You're bringing it full circle, which makes your essay feel more cohesive.
Thanks, that does feel stronger. But what about the middle of the essay? I still think it could use a bit more structure.
Let's look at that. You've got great points, but they need a bit more flow. Each paragraph should build on the one before it. For example, start with a general statement and move towards the more specific details.
So, I shouldn't jump straight into examples.
Right. It's important to set up the argument first, then go into the specifics. Try to make sure each paragraph transitions smoothly into the next one.
Should I use transitional phrases for that?
Yes, absolutely. Phrases like furthermore, in addition, or on the other hand can help guide the reader through your argument.
That makes sense. It'll create a better flow.
Exactly, and don't be afraid to go back and tweak things. Sometimes the middle of an essay needs more revision than the beginning or the end.
I'll focus on that. What do you think of my tone?
Your tone is mostly good, but it's a little too formal in some parts. Try to make it a bit more conversational without losing academic credibility.
So, you want me to sound more approachable but still professional?
Yes, that's the balance. Think about how you would explain these ideas to someone in a casual conversation, but without sounding too informal.
I'll work on making it more natural. Should I also check for repetition?
Absolutely. If you're repeating the same words or ideas too often, it can weaken your argument. Try to vary your language.
I've noticed that sometimes I repeat phrases. I'll keep an eye on that.
Great. You've got the right mindset. Keep revising and refining, and you'll end up with a solid essay.
Thanks. I think I'm getting a better idea of how to improve it now.
You're on the right track. Just remember, writing is a process. The more you refine, the stronger your work will be.
I'll keep working on it and bring it to you once it's more polished.
Sounds like a plan. Don't hesitate to ask if you have more questions along the way.
I will. I appreciate your feedback. It's really helping me focus on the key points.
You're welcome. I'm glad it's helpful. Keep going, and we'll make sure it's the best it can be.